Joining me right now, David Nir, political director at Daily Kos, elections, and co-host of The Down Ballot, his podcast, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts. And he's been looking at what's going on and has a lot to say. And certainly, I've been looking forward to speaking to him. David Nir, welcome back to the program. I think maybe we have he may have his Zoom muted. No, there it is. Are you there?
It's been a long week, Mike. What a rookie move. I can't believe I did that.
Oh, no. I can't tell you. In the last week, maybe 3 or 4 people have done that. So it must be an election, no sleep thing going on.
Exactly right.
So tell me what your thoughts were going in to the election, because I think we all were talking about how we were frustrated with a lot of the media and the way they were covering this and the way polls were being interpreted. Nonetheless, gave us a lot of anxiety. But so tell me a bit about how you were feeling and then how you felt as you saw things come in.
I was very pessimistic, Mike. There were a lot of reasons to feel fairly glum heading into this election that had nothing to do with the polls and nothing to do with the media. The largest being this was a midterm, and we know what typically happens in midterms, happens almost always in midterms. And, the economy is in a very strange place with a lot of people really struggling. Mm-hmm. And I had very low expectations heading into this election. That said, I really did try very hard to tune out a lot of these garbage polls. There was no question that low quality Republican polls were flooding the zone, as a lot of people have said. And it's to the discredit of a lot of analysts, a lot of journalists, poll aggregators for including these polls, for giving credence to these polls. Some of these pollsters, including the worst of them all, Trafalgar, are run by election deniers, people who believe in the big lie just as much as Donald Trump does. Mm-hmm. And there is no reason to pay them any attention at all. And that definitely contributed to it, as you were suggesting a moment ago, the anxiety that a lot of people felt. And that's unfortunate. But the good news, the amazing news, Mike, it didn't wind up mattering, did it?
No. And I have to tell you, when I started seeing the polling outfit called Patriot Polls, that's when I really lost it. Are you kidding me? Are you really including a poll called Patriot Poll? It really is amazing to see how the Republican messaging, which they really believed, they were really intoxicated with the idea that, whether they were high on their own polls or whatever, I don't know, but they really were intoxicated with the idea that this messaging was going to work and that the Democrats had somehow, just peaked with abortion. Abortion just peaked, right? Like people were over with it. I guess, they got used to it, right? They really believed it.
It really is amazing. They thought there would be absolutely no penalty to be paid whatsoever for their extremism and for their disregard of democracy. And I got to admit, Mike, I was worried that they were right. And it's an unbelievable relief, unbelievable to know that they were wrong. And in terms of abortion, which you just mentioned, we can't talk enough about that issue. And in particular, you were just saying about abortion peaking, on our podcast that you mentioned, The Down Ballot, today, a new episode just came out. And my co-host, David Nir, pointed out that Republicans were treating, and the media were treating, abortion like this issue that was just going to go away. They see gas prices go up and voters get grumpy, and gas prices go back down and the issue recedes. And they sort of thought, oh, well, Dobbs was in June and, it's been 3 months since then, so that issue's faded. Are you kidding me? This is not how people work. This is not how people live their lives. Abortion is gone in much of the country and under attack in many other parts of the country. And this is an ever-present issue for millions upon millions of people. and it didn't go away. It couldn't go away. And Republicans wished it away, and pundits thought it went away. And boy, were they ever wrong. And I have to say, I have to give huge credit to the Democrats, and I do mean Democrats up and down the ballot all across the country, for sticking with this issue, because it was the right thing to stick with no matter what. And they could have easily gotten frightened away from it, and they didn't. And you rarely see Democrats really stick together on something like this as durably as they had, especially in the face of all this scaremongering from the press and the GOP.
Right. And the threat to democracy, really focusing on that. And of course, Donald Trump injecting himself back into everything really just was like a reminder to everyone. And it happens all the time when he, is back on the campaign trail, but he's not actually on the ballot. And, he went to Pennsylvania, and Dr. Oz campaigned with him. And I think that really hurt him. And then President Obama coming out and just electrifying people. It was like he was the antidote to that. It just was really amazing.
It's so interesting that you talk about Trump's presence or lack thereof. Obviously, he wasn't literally on the ballot. He did make some campaign appearances, but Trump only ever cares about Trump. And I have been spending a lot of time thinking about, why have we not seen this massive outpouring of lies again from the GOP about stolen elections, especially since they were so sure that they were going to win? So isn't that a ready-made narrative for, oh, well, the Democrats must have stolen this one too? And, there have been some who have pushed that BS, but for the most part, they really haven't. And part, I think, is maybe they were just shell-shocked and they just hadn't worked themselves up yet to do this, stolen election narrative, because they expected to win. But the other part of it, I think, is that Trump isn't out there pushing this.
Right.
And I think that that shows just what a ringleader he was in 2020, that he really was responsible for pushing that whole movement. And he doesn't care now because he wasn't on the ballot, just like he didn't care in the Georgia runoffs, whether Republicans lost in 2021. And of course, we have another runoff now. So without Trump caring and pushing this whole stolen election narrative, Republicans are kind of like, they're floundering, and it doesn't interest them.
And you wrote about the race in Colorado, Lauren Boebert, who, of course, is one of the most, if not the most extreme member of Congress. I think maybe tying with Marjorie Taylor Greene. But then there is Paul Gosar, and I don't know.
It's a hard competition, right?
Right. She is now clinging to her seat in Congress in Colorado, in that third district where I think 98% of the vote is in, but there are still votes out. And Adam Frisch, Democrat, who we had on the program, has really given her quite a challenge. They are neck and neck in that race.
Yeah, this is one of the most stunning results of the night, regardless of the final outcome. This is a sprawling rural district with many rural parts across Western Colorado. It's 50,000 square miles. And also, Trump won it by 8 points. It's not the kind of turf that really would be amenable to Democrats, even in a year like 2018, a strong wave year. And so the fact that Boebert in particular is clearly paying a price for being so unacceptable is truly, truly remarkable. And that race, it's gone back and forth. It's very, very close. Boebert is up by several hundred votes right now, but there are still votes left to be counted. And one important detail to note is that Colorado is an all-mail voting state. Everyone casts ballots by mail. And there is an opportunity after the election, if election officials discover some sort of problem with your ballot, like they think the signature on the ballot doesn't match the signature they have on file, voters are given a chance to correct that problem. It's called ballot curing. And so right now, Democrats are running this massive operation to find voters who likely voted for Adam Frisch, the Democrat, who may have issues with their ballot, to help them and encourage them to fix their ballots. So even once all the votes are counted, voters have until, I believe it's Wednesday, next Wednesday, to cure their ballots. So in a race this close, things could really change up until the last second. And Democrats are really, really trying hard to make sure every valid vote gets counted.
I had Adam Frisch on the program a few weeks ago, And he talked about the kind of campaign he was running. He really was very strategic and very smart about this in reaching out to independents and also Republicans on the issue of abortion and on the issue of threat to democracy. And she is like Ms. Threat to Democracy, right? I mean, and so he really was about finding that common ground. And, ultimately, it really is what happened, I think, in this entire election in that sense, too, where you had a lot of people who, you know, really kind of were very worried about these issues, certainly a lot of independents. And Republicans really thought inflation in the economy would work with them. But they have to be looking at now. I mean, I don't know, because they should have been looking before, right? We've seen this before, but they've got to be looking at how they, especially with young people, how can they continue to win if they don't, you know, come up with a way they're going to deal with the issue of abortion, the way they're going to deal with election denying. I mean, how do they move forward?
Well, to your point about the sort of campaign that Frisch ran, trying to appeal to independents and moderate Republicans who care about things like abortion and democracy, we saw this happen in Kansas over the summer with the successful vote to defeat that anti-abortion amendment. That amendment went down to an 18-point defeat in a state that Trump won by 15 points. So that tells you that there's a huge swath of voters out there who may be independents or maybe Republicans who really do care about this issue. And to democracy protection, one really interesting phenomenon that I'm eager to look at more, but there's definitely a pattern that we've seen in a number of states from Tuesday night, which is that in races for Secretary of State, the people who administer elections in most states, the Democratic candidates got a higher share of the vote than many of the other Democrats also running for statewide office. Maybe they're running for auditor or attorney general or even governor. And so that says to me that a lot of voters were really paying attention to this particular issue of election administration and fairness and democracy. And in terms of what Republicans do, well, the GOP answer to demographics turning against them is to try to entrench minority rule. It's why they love the Electoral College. It's why they love the Senate. And it's why they try to gerrymander the hell out of the House, because they have no problem in governing without a majority. They think that's totally cool. They're completely fine with that. This is what happens when you reject the notion of democracy and the consent of the governed. And we are very, very lucky that in 2022, it turned out that this scheme mostly didn't work. Now, Democrats are probably still going to lose the House. And if we do, it's almost certainly gerrymandering is going to be the reason why, Republican gerrymandering. Mm-hmm. But, how long can the GOP keep trying to stay in charge with using minority rule? We'll see. But it's a bad situation no matter what.
Now, you said that they're probably going to win the House. There are races that they're right now leading in or have won already that would give them the House. They're going to have likely a very narrow majority here.
Oh, yeah. Now, I want to be very clear. It is not a foregone conclusion that they'll win the House. There are still enough races that are uncalled that if almost all of them tip Democrats' way, that Democrats would wind up with a narrow majority. And the fact that we're even talking about that, Mike, is astonishing. We should not be having this conversation. I mean, Republicans thought they were going to win 40 or 50 seats. But yeah, if the GOP, it does look more likely than not that the GOP will wind up with a majority, but it will be, like you just said, really narrow if they do. And if that happens, we will see so clearly the difference in skill level between Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy. Nancy Pelosi deserves so much credit for running such an unbelievably tight ship with such a small 5-seat majority for the last 2 years and getting so much done. And man, you were talking about the horror show, the GOP, of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Andy Biggses and the Paul Gosars and the Lauren Boeberts. Well, hopefully she won't be back. But Kevin McCarthy's got to try to keep 219 or 220 Republicans sticking together with those maniacs. inside the House,
Right.
good luck to him.
Right. Now, as it stands right now, Nevada and Arizona still counting votes. How do you feel about the votes that are outstanding and whether Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada and Mark Kelly will pull that out, and Democrats would have the Senate there, and the runoff in Georgia would be an extra seat if they won it?
I am feeling quite good about the Senate. I would bet on Democrats to win both of those. Mark Kelly's in a somewhat stronger position, but I think that Cortez Masto will wind up doing it. And like you said, if that happens, boom, Democrats are still in charge of the Senate. And then something I think interesting would happen in the Georgia race, which is it would suddenly become somewhat less nationalized than the runoffs were in 2020/21, when everyone knew that control of this Senate was on the line. So if Democrats are already in charge of the Senate, then, Republicans, they can't make an argument that, this is going to hand control back to Chuck Schumer, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that would probably benefit Raphael Warnock in a situation like that. A slightly, if the partisan temperature is slightly cooler, then I think it makes it easier to vote for the incumbent, especially when the challenger is Herschel Walker.
Right. Like if people had to hold their nose and vote for Herschel Walker because they are Republican and felt like, well, we've got to get the Senate back.
Right.
Now they don't have to do that again.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. Really interesting. And we'll see how that plays out. But I'm glad we could have this conversation today. And as always, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Mike, thank you so much again.
David Nir, Daily Kos political director, Daily Kos Elections, and of course the Down Ballot, his podcast that he co-hosts, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple or anywhere else. His podcast co-hosted with David Beard as well, and follow him. Well, David, are you now Mastodon? Is that it? Are you telling people to go to Twitter?
That's still on Twitter, watching it burn down.
Okay.
But still on Twitter at David Nir.
Okay, I am too. I'm there until it burns down. But I also have a Mastodon account, and I'm actually liking it over there. And you're at Mastodon too. What is your handle?
I am at Mastodon, to be honest, Mike. I don't remember my handle out there, but I do have it in my my Twitter profile bio. So
so people can find you
there.
Yeah, it's it's Twitter's a whole other
pleasant
story. Yeah, at least we lasted through the election, and they didn't.
That's right.
They didn't screw it up. As always, David, thank you for coming on today.
Bye-bye.
We're back in a couple of minutes.
You're listening to the Michelangelo Signorelli Show on Sirius XM.